Welcome back to Tugboat Month, where I review both Tugs and Theodore Tugboat stuff respectively. And this time, we'll be talking about my top 5 favorite episodes of Theodore Tugboat. Why top 5? Well, here's what I'm thinking. For this video, I only want to pick one from each of the 5 seasons. And in case you don't know, there are only 5 seasons with 130 episodes produced total. Here's the backstory of how the Theodore Tugboat show came to be. It was created by Robert D. Cardona and Andrew Cochran, and Andrew told his 2-year-old son bedtime stories about tugboats, which was pretty sweet. The show lasted from 1993 all the way to 2001, and when Cochran Entertainment filed for bankruptcy, some of the models and props were brought over to the Maritime Museum of the Atlantic to be on permanent display, which was a very good thing in my opinion. Unfortunately, according to the very top portion of this trivia screenshot, some of the models that were on display in the early 2000s were accidentally thrown away by a museum volunteer. What an idiot. Not to mention that some of the models like Brunswick were sold on eBay in 2009, which is another dumb decision in my opinion because I think they should all stay in the museum storage where they belong, so that way they will still be in good hands just like the rest. But hey, at least some of them are still saved, including Theodore himself. And when I first saw them in person back in 2010, I didn't realize how big they were up close. I always thought they were the size of a bath toy. Oh, and before I move on, anyone who calls Theodore Tugboat a watered-down version of Tugs is dead wrong. Why? Because Theodore Tugboat is trying to be its own show, and that it's more family-friendly than Tugs. Not to say that Tugs is a bad show, but you get my point. Plus, if it weren't for the original Tugs show, we wouldn't have gotten Theodore Tugboat or Salty's Lighthouse for that matter. Anyways, back to topic. As I've said before, I'm only picking one from each of the 5 seasons. Even though I technically love all of them, but these are the 5 from each of these seasons I love the most. So without further ado, let's start sailing. Number 5 is Theodore and the Oil Rig. In this episode, Theodore and George encounter a huge oil rig from Texas who is coincidentally named Tex and was very rude to them because he thought he didn't need any help from little tugs like them. I like this episode a lot because, for one thing, I think Tex is a very interesting character because of his southern accent and personality, though I still think Owen's the best because he puts smiles on everyone at the big harbor. I also enjoy the climax where Theodore and George save him from ramming into Benjamin Bridge, which Tex thanks them for in the end. But the reason this is so low on the list is because, for one thing, it was the very first episode in airing order, while the real first episode, Theodore in the Big Harbor, was the very last season 1 episode made in airing order, even though it was first in production order. Yeah, that's one of the only few problems I have with this show, is that the episodes aren't in perfect chronological order, and this is no exception. Another reason why this is number 5 is because when I first saw season 1 as a kid, I didn't like how the characters originally looked, particularly the tugboats, because they looked too different and ugly. Thankfully, they redesigned them in later seasons to make them more appealing. Number 4. Hank and the Hug. When it comes to Hank episodes, this is one of my favorites, and it's my most favorite season 2 episode overall. In this episode, Hank gets very upset because no one wants to do the things he wants to do. The other tugboats try to cheer him up, but he just wants to be by himself until Theodore had an idea about giving him a quote-unquote tug hug, which did the trick. I like this episode because sometimes I like to get a hug whenever I feel crabby too. And I knew how Hank felt when he wanted to do things he wanted to do, only for him to not get his way in the end. And if you are in need of a hug or something to make you feel better, then this episode can cheer you up. Number 3. A Joke Too Far. This is a season 3 episode about Theodore and Barrington Barge playing a joke with their friend Petra the pilot boat. But when they picked the best hiding spot, things have gotten a little out of hand when Theodore and Barrington hid for too long, which caused everyone, including Petra, Foduck, and Constance, to worry about them. The next morning, Theodore learned his lesson and asked the dispatcher and Donald Dock for their approval to pull Barrington barge again, which they thankfully approved of. What I love about this episode is the joke that Theodore and Barrington play on Petra. Not that it's funny to begin with, but because it looks kind of fun to play. But the best part of the episode, in my opinion, is the moral, which is never go into hiding forever. Otherwise your friends will worry about you and where you've been. In fact, that's what Thomas should have learned in Big World Big Adventures the movie in the first place. I also like the character Barrington Barge because he's calm, quiet, and very friendly. One of my dogs is also named Barrington, which is why I've decided to buy his Brio model off eBay. Number 2. Rebecca and the Big Snore. This is a Season 4 episode where it stars Rebecca the research vessel. The story is that Rebecca couldn't get enough sleep because of Benjamin Bridges' loud snoring, which causes her to be tired and cranky the next morning. Later in the episode, Rebecca apologizes for being tired and grumpy, and told Theodore that Benjamin had kept her all night with his snoring. That is when they learn that nobody is perfect, and in order to keep Benjamin from snoring, they've planned to tie the bell they found earlier to Benjamin, so whenever he snores loudly and shakes, the bell would ring. This is the biggest reason why this is my favorite Season 4 episode. It's because of the moral. We all know that nobody is perfect. I'm not perfect, you're not perfect, and even this show isn't perfect. Besides, if everything is perfect, then life will be boring and uninteresting. Oh, and one last thing. I did chuckle at this one line in the episode where after Rebecca says, "Let's just get to work," Theodore repeats the same line and tone as she did.
"Let's just get to work," frowned Rebecca. "Yeah, let's just get to work," Theodore frowned at Shelburne, just like Rebecca.
Now before I get to my number 1 pick, I just want to give a few honorable mentions. Theodore and the Big Harbor. In production order, this was the very first episode of Season 1, but it was the final episode of Season 1 in airing order. Even though I like this episode, but the only things I don't like about it are Benjamin Bridge being a bully to Theodore, as well as the original tugboat designs, which I think are ugly. Hank Hurts a Ship. This would be my second favorite Hank episode, but because of that, it got beat out by Hank in the Hug. Theodore's Big Decision. While I did enjoy this episode, the only thing I don't like about it is that it was the final episode produced, and I wish they made another season after this. Guysborough's Garbage. It would have been number 2 in terms of Season 4 episodes. And my number 1 most favorite Theodore Tugboat episode of all time is Theodore and the Unsafe Ship. I don't know about you guys, but Season 5 is my most favorite season of Theodore Tugboat, mainly because it has the most episodes, with a total of 35, while the previous 4 seasons had 30. Anyways, in this episode, Theodore tries to get Cabot to obey, but he just wouldn't listen, leading to some of his cargo to fall into the ocean, which then Theodore picks up. Later, he had a great plan. Theodore decided to use reverse psychology to trick Cabot into making him listen by making him go to the sandy beach, in which he gets stuck at the end due to the shallow end of the beach. One thing I love about this episode is that it teaches the audience about problem solving, which in this case, Theodore planned to make Cabot obey by using reverse psychology about the sandy beach. I also think Cabot is a pretty good antagonist, even though he only appeared once, and according to the harbor master at the end, he's much better behaved nowadays. But the best part of this episode, in my opinion, is his epic piano theme. Here, let me show you a couple snippets.
"You don't have to tow me in," interrupted Cabot, "because I'm going in by myself." Well, Theodore couldn't believe his eyes. Cabot cruised right past him, heading towards the big harbor. Oh boy, oh boy, oh boy, oh boy, oh boy, said Bedford.
Pretty awesome, huh? Well, now you know why this is my all-time favorite episode, not just in season 5, but in the entire series overall. Now let me know in the comments section of which of these Theodore Tugboat episodes are your favorite. Do you agree with my list, or do you have your own personal preference? There will be one more video on Tugboat Month. But first, I need to finish part 3 on something, and I bet you know what that is. This is Trevor Davis, signing off.